Our first reading this morning is from Genesis, chapter 18, verses 1 through 15, and chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up, and he saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Have I grown old, and my husband is old? Shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh. The Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised." Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son whom Sarah had borne. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Now Sarah said, "God has brought laughter for me, everyone who will laugh with me." And she said, "Who would have ever said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Our second reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 9, verse 35 through chapter 10, verse 8, and verses 9 through 23. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, and cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for laborers deserve their food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy, and stay there until you leave. As you enter the house, greet it, and if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as soon as you leave that house or town. Truly, I tell you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of them, for they will hand you over to councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in town, flee to the next, for truly, I tell you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Here ends today's readings from our Holy Scriptures, and so may God bless this, our understanding of God's loving word. For this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Dear Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be found acceptable in your sight. You are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So as I mentioned earlier, our Hebrew scripture this morning that Janet read to us tells of the time that Abraham and Sarah provided hospitality to 3 strangers traveling in the heat of the midday sun. Unbeknownst to either of them, the 3 strangers were in reality a manifestation of God. Many readers will see a hint of the Trinity here, not present in Jewish theology for sure. God in 3 persons for those of us in the Christian faith. Abraham did exactly what was expected of him in that social situation. He invited the 3 travelers to rest in the shade of a tree by their camp, to wash their feet from the dust that they got from traveling, the dirt that accumulated on their feet, to have some water and some bread, and then a more substantial meal as that was prepared. Travelers themselves, Sarah and Abraham faithfully endeavored to fulfill the obligations of those as hosts to visitors, offering respite and refreshment without concern for repayment, without concern for the use of their own food and water that they themselves would need for the journey. So in the first paragraph of this part of their story, we have 2 important concepts of faith that we should lift up. You never know when or how God will show up in your life, and that faithful children of God can show kindness and hospitality no matter where we are on our own journeys. Abraham stood by as the 3 strangers ate and refreshed themselves. And then they asked about Abraham's wife, Sarah. One of them said that Sarah was going to bear a son. Now, Sarah had been listening inside the tent, and she laughed to herself because she was in her 90s. And one of the 3 heard her laugh and asked, "Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?" And reiterated that Sarah would, in fact, bear a son. But Sarah, like most of us in that situation who got caught laughing when maybe she shouldn't have, although I know it was pretty funny for her, she denied laughing because she was afraid, because I think she was starting to get a sense of who these 3 were, these travelers, God in the form of 3 travelers. They had heard her laugh to herself. Now, you and I can, over a friendly coffee, debate at some other time whether having a baby at 90 is a blessing or a curse. We'd probably agree. The miracle of Sarah having and bearing a child comes after many painful years of not being able to conceive, after a painful experience of adopting a child from a surrogate, Hagar. A totally different sermon. We'll get to there someday, but their slave Hagar bore them a son, Ishmael. But Sarah laughed because of the natural order of things. It's not natural for a 90-year-old to bear children. But God was clear to both Abraham and Sarah that nothing is too wonderful for God. Since there is no evidence in history that any other 90-year-old has given birth, we can look to this important part of the Sarah and Abraham story cycle as either a miracle or a metaphor. We can believe that Sarah did in fact conceive and bear Isaac in spite of her advancing years, and of course we have stories about Isaac too. Or we can believe that this is also a metaphor of how the children of God in their later years can still bear fruit of the Spirit. Really, the metaphor stands for both options, but what are we to make of the important component of Sarah and Abraham's cycle? On the road, at the urging of God, they come to provide hospitality and comfort to some travelers who in fact turn out to be God in the form of three persons. One predicts that Sarah will bear a child, and after Sarah has a little chuckle over that absurdity and that impossibility, Sarah finds herself a little embarrassed, maybe a bit defensive. But God is persistent in predicting that Sarah's pregnancy and birth will in fact come to be a miracle, a gift to this faithful couple that had struggled with fertility, and an important component to the future of the people of Israel, and by extension, those who in the further future would become Christian. Our faith tells us that nothing is too great for our God. Nothing is impossible for the God who created the universe, the God who created humanity, and nothing is impossible for the God of love, God's Son, and the Holy Spirit. So what are we to take from this story of Sarah and Abraham? One thing is that we can never predict how or when or where we might encounter God. Another thing might be that every encounter we have with another child of God is, in fact, an encounter with God. Yet another thing is that nothing is impossible for God, even if there aren't many of us who would welcome a child at 90. Neither Sarah nor Abraham asked God specifically at this time for a child. That part of their lives had moved on. They'd already had that pain, that heartache of infertility. They'd already begged God for a child, and God's answer at that time was Ishmael. Well, those prayers were given 70 years ago. And because of the way this story is told, though, the proximity of the prophecy from God or from one of the strangers and Sarah's conception and birth makes it look like God rewarded them with a child as a direct consequence of their hospitality. We can view this story as a simple but sacred transaction, God giving Sarah and Abraham a child in exchange for their faithful hospitality, but it's not that simple. While nothing is impossible for our Creator God, for our Savior and the Holy Spirit, individually or collectively, few of us experience this kind of transaction at this kind of level. In fact, our interface with God isn't transactional. It isn't quid pro quo, this for that. I pray for this and you give me that. I don't believe God's gifts or God's response to our prayers is transactional. God gives gifts unconditionally, even when we don't ask for them. And God does other things when we ask for something specific and doesn't answer our prayers the way we want God to answer them. We can't know God's logic, so we ask for things. We ask for what we want and we ask for what we need. We ask for miracles and we pray for miracles, and then we try to act faithfully in order to show God how faithful we are. And sometimes God responds in a way that we can see, in a way that we can understand. And often, though, God responds in ways that we don't see at all and that we don't understand. This is a foundational mystery between God and God's children. we have this hope to have our prayers answered, desperately answered. God responds as God will. And we are left to interpret or decipher God's response or non-response in light of our own faith. Now, we each probably have some examples of where we believe that God has responded to our prayers, and examples of where we believe that God did not answer our prayers. It's also very likely that God answered our prayers, but not in the way we were looking for. So what are we to do with this scripture? This incredibly powerful foundational text that lies at the heart of the Jewish faith and identity and the Christian faith. It raises some important questions about how God interacts with us as God's children. Maybe instead of seeing God giving us gifts and blessings in response to our faithful acts and behavior, we might think about looking at this as God giving us unconditional love and life right from the start, and our response to those gifts and blessings should be faithful acts, faithful worship, and gratitude. Our daughter played a song for me one time on our way back to Plattsburgh for her undergraduate work, which usually was about 6 hours of torture, I think, but as Betsy can attest. But there was a song that she played over and over and over again, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the artist. I'm going to give you the refrain that came over and over again. Maybe it was Drake, maybe it was Drake. The phrase was, our prayers go up and the blessings come down. Okay, that's transactional, right? We ask for God for something, we pray for God, the prayers go up, and the blessings come down. And that was the refrain. And it bugged me because it didn't feel like the right theology. Because the blessings come down first. And the prayers of gratitude then go up, right? But Drake's not going to listen to me. He's made millions off this song. He's made a lot of money, so I don't think he's going to allow me to correct his theology on this. It is curious, and another sermon at some point is religious imagery in popular music. And given that it's Music Sunday, I'm not going to go on about that, but I think it could be a good sermon, so I think I'll start working on that. But here's the thing. God's blessings and our prayers and our faithful acts, they're all mysterious, right? And while I'm not advocating that we give up on asking God for things that we need, for forgiveness or healing or help with a crisis, I hope that we can start to see all the blessings that God gives us unconditionally, and that we can show God our gratitude for those blessings by living and loving in our faith lives. As we love our neighbors, God comes to us in the form of strangers. So may we always be ready to offer compassion and to welcome the sacred in whatever form we meet the sacred, unfamiliar neighbors, strangers, or people in need. And may we always be ready to send up our prayers of gratitude for the blessings that come down. Amen.